have to be very careful if you want to be healthy in the 21st century to pick what we were talking about, the foods that you can easily digest, assimilate, and eliminate without immune burden, remembering that your hormones come from your fats. So if you have healthy, that means fats that haven't been oxidized and damaged and made rancid. If you have healthy fats, you can make healthy hormones. But if you have damaged fats, you're going to make damaged hormones. And damaged hormones wreak havoc. Damaged hormones are not your friend.
I'm so glad you mentioned a few things that really triggered my brain to think, I think, in a healthy way. You could be vegetarian and go for ketchup and peanut butter and vegetable oils. You hear this all over the place in the mainstream consciousness, if you will. But all of it is crap. Most of it. Meaning that it can be laced with all kinds of terrible oils, the vegetable oils are, high in omega-6s, pro-inflammatory, your ketchups, your mustards, your mayos, your all these things, peanut butter that I mentioned, filled with sugar. And people would think, well, it's just peanut butter, it's roasted peanuts. You whip them up and you can just put it on your finger and eat it straight away. But there's sugar in there. People have to be careful that they're not even necessarily eating what they think they're eating.
Well, the good news is that if you follow what I say, which is 60% complex carbs and fiber, 20% of calories from fat, and 20% of calories from protein, you can live long and well, and you can have a variety of cuisines, and it can be nutritious and delicious, but you will have taken edible oils out of your diet. You will not be eating crisped or chipped or extruded foods. You will be looking at labels for words you understand and not for chemicals you don't. Many of the things that are commonly included in our diet, in our American diet, including benzoates, propionates, and a variety of other things that prolong, quote, freshness, but impair your liver, are no longer legal in Europe. And I was talking to a driver who said to me that he picks up non-American people all the time in the Orlando area, and they constantly comment on how awful our food is. It doesn't taste like food. It's processed way too much. And how can you Americans who are gaining weight at a prodigious rate, how can you do this to yourselves? Because if you're a little overweight, your liver is probably part of the overweight because of the fat.
I know a lot of healthcare providers say, don't worry about it. Eat fruits and vegetables, organic, non-organic, it doesn't matter. But again, I'm just thinking about what you said, and conventionally raised fruits and vegetables, at least let's stick to the fruits. You go into the store, at least for me, when I go in there, it's like wax, like what you said. How could somebody eat this? But again, with all due respect and with such a sadness in my heart, so many people buy this food. They have no idea what they're eating when they see a nice, bright, shiny apple that's 6 months or more old that is just coated with something they would never want to eat if they actually saw it under a microscope.
Well, we have a very simple rule. I was taught this by Beatrice Trum-Hunter, and it goes like this. You buy around the periphery of the store and you stay out of the aisles. So if you stay out of the aisles, you're going to stay out of most of the packaging and the processing. Now you get to the fresh produce, and what you said is exactly correct. Where we shop, they actually tell you whether it's conventionally or organically grown. And if it's organically grown, we might buy it. And if it's not organically grown, we don't need it. So we have basically seasonal change in our diet just by selecting for the more nutritious and delicious organic or biodynamic sources, and that makes up 85-90% of my diet, and I recommend this. And I understand exactly what you say, Jonathan, but you know, in the 8,000 hours of medical school that I had, plus 4,000 hours of postgraduate training, I only had 4 hours about lifestyle, nutrition, and attitude, and most of that was a book report. So my point is very simple. Talk to someone who knows by experience what they're talking about. Don't talk to people who have opinions that were passed down to them from generations of mistakes and myths.
Well, that's so strong what you just said. Let's be clear for the record. You come from medical school training, conventional medical school training.
MD, PhD, double board certified pathologist. I am not just the average clinician. I had the great good fortune of being cross trained. And then I was skeptical and curious and got the additional information that I now advocate.
But you're basically saying then it would be like going to an auto mechanic and saying, hey, what should I do about my heart disease? Pretty much that's what you're saying in terms of going to a conventionally trained doctor and saying, why don't they help me? Why don't they give me more guidance? I think we have to move people away from that kind of false expectation. And like you say, just go towards someone who really gets it.
Exactly right, Jonathan. I've seen the rise of acupuncture as a profession. I predict the rise not just of clinical nutritionalists, but of health coaches. America needs 500,000 health coaches at a minimum to replace the wisdom of aunts and extended families that got lost in the 1950s and is very hard to bring back today. And when you do that, now you can go to someone who really spends a good deal of their professional time learning about the subject you're talking about, as opposed to someone who is credentialed and licensed as a physician. But honestly, and this is the 3 hardest words for a medical doctor or an osteopathic doctor to say, I don't know. It's easy for me to say I don't know because I know how little I know, but I do know a little bit more than most other people because I have had mentoring rather than professional book learning, that mentoring that led to action, mentoring that led to experience. Most of my teachers refused to let me out without eating with me, and they showed me that portion control is a good thing to have, but eating the foods that your body is compatible with to the point where you're half full, and starting every meal with something wet and warm to let your stomach know that food's going to be coming in. And knowing that digestion begins with your eyes and continues with your mouth and stomach and intestines. Most clinicians, if you give them that quiz, they won't pass the quiz because they just... I have empathy and compassion for them, and I fully agree with you. We should not blame the victim. We should have empathy and compassion and live by example that encourages people to take information and inspiration that we can give and put some perspiration, some effort in. Because it's where they put effort in that they're going to get rewards. You can know a lot, but do a little, and that's okay, but you'll get more benefit out of doing a little more and knowing a little less.
And I would add just one more thing that I think would be quite revealing for the average person out there to not get duped by this anymore. Maybe they do say something to a conventionally trained physician, and they get the roll of the eye, or they get some little quick comment like, or a nod of the head, negative, no, don't do that. I would just encourage every person watching us to just simply say, why do you say that? Just in a nice, non-confrontational way, ask the healthcare provider why they're so down on something. And if they just did that, I think everybody understands where I'm going with this. It would be quite revealing, I think most of the time, again, I know it's a general statement, that a lot of times these providers don't really have an answer. If they don't know, it would be great, it's an ideal world that we're talking about, that they would just say, I don't know. Let me look into it for you. But that's unrealistic. The reality is that's what they will probably do, be negative and not even be able to give a reason. So at least ask so that you can see it for yourself.
Yes, but the antidote to that is healthstudiescollegium.org, a 25-year-old foundation dedicated to science and policy and practice of these integrative, holistic, comprehensive approaches. So for those who want to get that kind of information or guidance, then they want to have someone who's been certified in what we now call functional or integrative or holistic or comprehensive care. And I don't mean someone who just put a shingle on the door that says, I'm functional, please give me your money. I mean someone who shows you by example that they have chosen to live this way, that they are willing to explain by analogy what's going on with you because they truly understand. And I agree with Albert Einstein. If you understand your subject, you can explain it to anyone. And you don't have to have them drinking from a fire hose and drowning in jargon. You can explain what's going on if you really understand it. And I'll flip that one around. When the doctor can't explain what's going on, it's because they don't really understand. And you have to forgive them because they weren't trained.
Microbiome. Very big topic these days. Everybody's talking about how important the microbiome is. Link it up for us a little bit in a way that we can understand it between the microbiome and this whole liver issue that we're talking about.
Right. Having been concerned about what we now call the microbiome since the 1970s, when I published in this area, we used to just call it digestion, but it's sexier to say microbiome. We used to say metabolism. Now we say metabolome. Okay. What does that mean? Well, it means, and some of this is information that only has come out in the last 5 or so years. For example, if you take in enough of the healthy prebiotics, probiotics, and symbiotics, you crowd out the pathogens and they go away on their own. Let me say that again. The pathogenic bad bugs only exist when you feed them. You only feed them when you have maldigestion, dysbiosis, enteropathy, which means atrophy of your digestive capacities, and other problems of digestion, which may be silent to you, but are not silent to your metabolism, your microbiome, or your health.
Is that what you just described? Is that like sort of, again, thing popped into my head, feed me, feed me, feed me, that there is that vicious cycle of if that's a bad environment inside of you, you actually have those cravings more and more for those things, almost to a sense, a lot of people feel uncontrollable cravings, right?
Food cravings are a subject that we should talk about, but different. No, what I'm saying is if you take in enough of the unprocessed fiber, the 40 to 100 grams of fiber that Dennis Burkitt showed us we needed for healthy digestion to feed the healthy bugs, if you take in enough of the active organisms, the 40 to 100 billion a day from fermented foods and from active probiotic supplements, and the recycled glutamine to energize and repair the lining of your intestines, now your digestion improves to the point where you will not have partially digested food remnants invading the body, impairing the repair process. And when the repair process is impaired, we call that inflammation, but it's really the opportunity to repair. And when you take in enough of the ascorbate and other essential nutrients, now you can reverse that repair deficit. You can go back into a resilient mode. We say that you have 2 modes of being. You can either be in survival mode, which is most people. They're kind of easily fatigued and irritable and not very happy. Or what we recommend, thrival mode or healthier mode, which is a mode in which you are resilient. You see challenges as opportunities because you've learned the optimism that comes with a healthy diet. It turns out it's as simple as this, but it's a reversal of our thinking. It's a paradigm shift. We used to think that the bad bugs got in from the environment and then wreaked havoc. Now we know that the only time they do that is when people have already impaired their healthy bugs, because while we need 40 to 100 grams of fiber, the average American gets in 4 or 5 a day. While we need 40 to 100 billion healthy bugs, the average American gets in a few billion a day. Now, you can correct that with a few capsules or some live kimchi or some live pickles or things like that, or sauerkraut. You can even make some of this at home if you want to do that, and we do. So you can prevent the bad pathogens from taking root and taking over simply by crowding them out and stimulating repair with diet, with hydration, with attitude, and with activity.
And to wrap this point up that we've been talking about now for the last few minutes, to be very clear, cravings for certain foods that make you feel like they're controlling your life is not a healthy state. That is clearly a sign that something's going on in your gut that's not so great. Isn't that fair to say?
I'd say largely that is true, and I'll give you the one exception, but to agree with you largely, what's called pica. Pica is a condition in which you crave certain foods. For example, many constipated people crave Epsom salts. Now, Epsom salts is magnesium sulfate. If you take enough Epsom salts, you will probably poop. And part of the safety of magnesium has been proved because people in the South who ate a lot of clay, which made them constipated, often found that if they took 50 grams, which is more than I'm recommending, of Epsom salts by mouth, they would regularize, they would poop. Now, measuring your transit time is something we recommend that everybody do, and it should be 12 to 18 hours. What you eat at night should be coming out the next morning. That's a healthy digestive transit. That's a global measure of how healthy your digestion is.
You know,
now,
to connect people with
Yeah.
what you just said, if you just look at a very small child, an infant, and how they're eating not even necessarily big meals of lobster and shrimp and steak and all these things, they're going to the bathroom and they're eliminating quite often.
And the point you're making is also one that has recently been documented, which is the microbiome of most infants does not mature properly, and that sets them up for a lifetime of digestive problems. Why? Because they're not breastfed long enough, because their moms weren't nutritionally well nourished during that weaning process. And so, yes, you can trace much of this back to there. But if we get back to food cravings, the most common food craving that I hear about is sugar. And sugar craving, in a very large proportion of cases, is due to low vitamin C. So if you take enough nature's form of ascorbate, vitamin C, the sugar craving often, I mean, 3/4 of the reports that we've gotten spontaneously are that people who had decades of sugar craving had it shut down as soon as they took in enough vitamin C.
And that's so powerful what you just said there alone, because again, we can link back all of these issues with the liver to sugar. And if people feel so controlled by their sugar cravings, don't beat yourself up. Just up the level of your vitamin C intake and see what happens. Use yourself as your own scientific experiment and see how it goes.
Right. Sugar, fat, and salt addict not just the tongue, but the gut, brain, and the central nervous system. It's called the crave factor. It's studied by companies that package goods, none of which we currently support.
So, Dr. Jaffe, to tie this all together, the microbiome's connection to the liver is what?
Well, your digestion cannot exist without your liver, and your liver cannot exist without your digestion. So it's a kind of intimate communion.
Dr. Jaffe, another thing that people, I don't think, talk about too much is the gallbladder. What's its relationship to the liver? Help us understand this.
Well, we used to have the misunderstanding that the gallbladder was just a sac that hid under the liver to collect the bile that the liver produces so that you could produce bile into the digestive tract, into the intestines, so that you could get fat into the body. If you don't have bile, then fat-soluble vitamins don't come in. If you don't have healthy bile, then you don't absorb your fat and emulsify it properly. And frankly, most of us eat too much fat, and much of that fat is damaged. And so if you eat whole foods as your source of fat, it makes it easier for your liver to produce a more liquid or more fluid bile. It makes it easier for your gallbladder to contract as opposed to just make sludge. And it makes it easier for your digestion to be healthy.
You know, as we're talking about the gallbladder, I'm also thinking about what about all those people out there watching and say, but I don't have a gallbladder. What can I do? What do you say to them?
Well, I say to them the same thing I say to any other person. If you want to have a healthy life, you eat 60% complex carbs, 20% from fat that comes from whole foods. You don't add edible oils to your diet. You don't have processed foods, which means in turn your liver can produce a healthier, more liquid bile that can flow directly into your intestines. And by the way, you may not eat meals with lots of fat in them. You may actually do much better eating 4 or 5 smaller meals each day. So you can live without your gallbladder, you can live well without your gallbladder, but you have lost some of your resilience. You've lost some of your reserves. It's very common, and my recommendation where possible is don't have it done, although it is so much easier with the minimally invasive surgery today that many times doctors now say, well, you know, the old procedure was kind of harrowing, the new one is less so why don't we just remove it? You don't really need it to survive. Well, that's true. You don't need it to survive. But I can tell you life is much better if you have a gallbladder and if you manage your reality. Reality is the doctor took the gallbladder out, so now I have to depend upon my liver to deliver enough soluble bile. That means eating whole foods that make for soluble bile, whereas processed foods make for sludgy bile. You mentioned omega-6. According to the N. Haynes National Nutrition Survey, according to Artemis Simopoulos and other experts, Americans often take in 30 to 60 times more omega-6 than omega-3, and a healthy relationship is probably 4 to 1. Artemis is the person who put the Greek Mediterranean diet on the map. Your listeners may want to know that a Mediterranean lifestyle, a Mediterranean diet, is a healthier diet, but particularly the Greek Mediterranean diet, because it's so rich in omega-3 sources in the diet. But a traditional Japanese diet is an option. In every culture, there are people who live long and well, and they all follow the alkaline way, and they stay away from being acidic. They all nurture their digestive tract and their microbiome. They respect their liver, plus or minus their gallbladder, and they make amends. And if you have decades of being a typical American, but now your eyes are open and your ears can hear, take action.
You would say most chronic diseases stem from being too acidic?
That was first said in the 1930s, and I'm glad to stand on the shoulders of those who said it. I believe if you read Sir William Osler, a giant of Western medicine, he helped found Johns Hopkins. He was the Regius Professor of Medicine in London. In his textbook of medicine, he says the duty and responsibility of a modern physician is to convince consumers to never take pharmaceuticals. And his friend, who was a justice and a doctor, Oliver Wendell Holmes, famously said, if you took the entire pharmaceutical pharmacopoeia and put it in a great steamer trunk and threw it in the ocean, it would be all the better for the patients and all the worser for the fishes.
I hope you're enjoying the Fatty Liver DocuClass. If you'd like to own a copy of this event, plus all the other bonuses available now, simply click the link below and choose the package that best fits your needs. Don't forget to watch today the final video on this page, which features Dr. Stephanie Seneff and her bombshell news about glyphosate and your liver health. After listening to her presentation, you'll never look at food the same way again.